Welcome back to the Dean Obeidallah Show. Joining us right now, very happy to have back on David Cay Johnston. He's a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, a best-selling author, co-founder of DCReport.org, and he teaches at Rochester Institute of Technology, known as RIT in upstate New York. Hello, David. Nice to see you.
Well, good to see you again, Dean.
So a lot going on. Let me ask you here. This is a little speculative. I will put that out there. If we were in court, the other side would object. But based on your understanding of Donald Trump, and even what we just talked about a second ago before we started, do you think Donald Trump and his family and inner circle finds a way to profit personally off rebuilding in Gaza if the rebuilding actually happens? It's a massive $50+ billion project. That's the estimate.
Oh, the Trump family is going to grift off everything they possibly can. I mean, it's just who they are. We shouldn't be surprised by this. It's been reported that Barron Hilton, Trump's fifth child by his third mama baby, has made well over $1 billion shorting crypto. I know that Trump has put out there that his son is one of the great crypto geniuses. And in time, we are going to find that what always happens with fake currencies will happen with crypto. It's made some people very, very wealthy, but a lot of people have been wiped out because, of course, it's fake money, and people are using real money to buy fake money. But Trump has his meme coin that's making him money, and he has all sorts of other things going on. It's just the nature of the family. When contracts are let to build in Gaza, you can be sure that the Trumps, in one way or another, they will be there with their hand out.
And I imagine there'll be some buildings named after Donald Trump, either organically or because he helped build it. But I have no doubt. Who knows? I mean, look, the rebuilding, we're not even close to that phrase yet. And it'll take years and years and years. But I just saw an estimate today, $53 billion. That's today. Right? It was by the World Bank like a few months ago. It'd probably be much more. And the money, and to be fair, a lot of the leaders in other countries will probably make some money off it as well. The difference is we're the United States of America. We're not a monarchy in the Middle East, which is a corrupt administration. We're not supposed to do this. They will. I mean, I'm sure Egypt Sisi will make some money on it. So this is America now. This is our country.
Well, there is a meme out there among some of the comedians that Donald wants to rename the country the United States of Trump. You have to understand, I mean, Donald, whom I've known for more than 37 years and I've spent a lot of time with and I've studied closely, Donald doesn't think like the rest of us. He has no guardrails internally. Everything he does is perfect and correct. And publicly in all these years, Donald has only once ever acknowledged an error in judgment or a mistake. And significantly, that error, which was about a year ago that he owned up to, was, I never should have left the White House. And of course, I had warned people as far back as 2011, if Donald ever gets to the White House, he will never leave peacefully.
Yes, and I could not agree with you more. And it's interesting, the pettiness of Donald Trump can never end. Like, he's coming back on the plane from Egypt. This is a big event. How it turns out in the long run, we don't know, but at least there's a temporary ceasefire. And he's posting, upset that Time magazine used, quote, a super bad photo of him in a relatively good story. And his hair didn't look good in the photo, disappeared my hair, and something I'm floating on top of me. And like, there's no time he can be divorced from this pettiness, this narcissism that rules him to his own detriment. I mean, objectively speaking, objectively, there's no need for this stuff.
I mean, Donald Trump got this ceasefire. It's the same deal that's been on the table now for about a year, but he got it, and let's give him credit for that, and he should enjoy his victory lap. But then, of course, being Donald, he has to claim that this is enduring peace in a golden age in the Middle East and other complete nonsense. This is just one little reduction in the temporary reduction in the problems we've seen. And already 24 hours later, we're seeing that there are problems that are already arising here. And all of this is of a piece. Donald is the greatest, most important person who's ever lived. By his own account, the only person who should ever be president. And at the same time, oh, a picture I don't like in Time magazine. Oh, oh, I mean, it's this mixture of his childish immaturity and vanity with
Yeah.
his assertions of unlimited authority, power, and brilliance.
Yesterday he talked about the Gaza deal. He says, quote, this took 3,000 years to get to this point. Can you believe it? No, you shouldn't believe it because, first of all, Trump wasn't working on it for 3,000 years. Second, Israel was created by the UN in 1947. Third, Christianity's only been around 2,000 years, and Islam's only been around for 1,400 years. So I don't know who was fighting 3,000 years ago, but it wasn't the parties that were involved in this negotiation. And I don't know if Biden would have said 3,000 years. And I don't want to get to the media double standard, but if Biden had said 3,000 years on the heels of saying who's habeas corpus and stuff like that from last week, the media would have went ballistic and berserk. But and I know it's
Actually,
nobody
Dean,
thinks.
let me be clear. As somebody who spent 40 years as a prominent journalist in this country, the Washington Monthly once called me one of America's most important journalists, and as a press critic throughout my career, both in-house, where I never hesitated to complain to the highest editor of the paper, and in my writings, there is a double standard going on here. It's baked in that Donald Trump says crazy things, and therefore they don't get the attention they would get. But yeah, if Joe Biden had said, who's habeas corpus, which for those who may not know is presenting the body, saying that you have a right to be seen by a magistrate if the police grab you or any law enforcement grabs you, it would be a major page one story. But it's not, because it's not news. We should all know by now that Donald Trump says crazy things. Well, the problem with that is that's the story. And
Right.
that's why it should get prominent attention. And the habeas corpus one is just a perfect example of Donald's severe cognitive decline over the years, but especially the last few years, and his complete ignorance. He continues to claim he's the world's greatest expert on 22 subjects. Now, anybody in any one of those subjects knows that there is no world's greatest expert on them. But the one I always get a kick out of is I have a worldwide reputation for my knowledge of taxes, tax policy, tax administration, and the economics of tax. Lectured on it on every continent except Antarctica because penguins don't pay taxes.
Fair.
And Donald claims to be not just the greatest expert in the world, but the greatest of all history and all time. So one day under oath, he's asked, so what do you know about accounting? I don't know anything about accounting. You don't know anything about accounting? No, I leave it at the bean counters. And the lawyers questioning him under oath are smart enough to tie him down for page after page after page in this deposition so he can never escape this. Well, here's the problem. You can't understand tax without an understanding accounting. To be the New York
Right.
Times tax reporter, where I won a Pulitzer and was a finalist 3 other times, I had to learn enough accounting that for 8 years I had an appointment on the faculty of a graduate accounting school, and I've gotten all sorts of awards from accounting schools. So to claim you're the world's greatest expert when you don't even know the basics is just indicative of who Donald is. He makes it up. He works a fictional narrative in his head. And if you don't agree with whatever he just said, well, you know what, Dean? Fake news.
Exactly. And I'm talking about David Cay Johnston, who only delivers the real news to us. David, I want to go back to something you said because we had Dr. John Gartner on from Duty to Warn last week. We've had him on a
Yeah.
few times now, and he was raising a lot of red flags about Trump, rightfully so. But the difference is, Donald Trump. John doesn't know. Dr. Gartner doesn't know Trump. You've known him for years. Is he how different of a person is it in terms of physicality, his gait, the way he walks? The way he talks now in a tone which is so different. And there are times he's lucid, but there's other times he's like whispering and he almost like he's breathing heavy. What do you see as someone who's known him for decades?
Oh, Donald's not in good health at all. And it's both physical and psychological. There's video of him in several places, notably Alaska, when he met with Putin, in which he can't walk in a straight line. And I don't mean he can't walk in a straight line the way I can't walk in a straight line because of an injury that I suffered. I mean, he zigzags visibly left to right, left to right. That's a sign of both a physical impairment and of cognitive impairment. he's clearly not in good health, and he tries to explain away when he wanders off elsewhere by calling it the weave and see how I
Right.
come back. Except many times he doesn't come back,
Mhm.
and many times it's clear he does not understand the question presented.
It's also, and this is human nature. And again, it was something Dr. Gartner brought up to me that I was not aware of, but now I know this more. Him talking about heaven more and
Yes,
about the next life. And
right.
that's something I don't really think about at my age, but I imagine there'd be a point where I will, because you always think about what's next. And he's 79, he's outlived all of his siblings, a lot of his peers are gone. He understands his health is failing on some level. I don't know, I can't say how bad it is. I just know it's not the same. And I wonder what that means. I wonder how that impacts him. Could he get nicer? Could he get more caring, or will he just be the same person? And I just wonder. It's pure speculation here. I just don't
It's
know.
not going to make him nicer. And in fact, he said the other day on video, "Oh, I'm never going to get to heaven. It's just
Oh
it's too
yeah,
bad." And as a devout non-believer,
right,
you didn't exist. You're born. You have a life, and then you cease to exist. But
right.
remember, Donald said during the first term when he was asked about his legacy as president, he said, "Well, who cares about legacy? You're dead." Donald very much is about now and what he's doing now, which does make him very unusual among people who've been president. Everybody who becomes president of the United States has a huge ego. You don't get there without one.
Sure.
But most of them think about, how am I going to be judged? And Donald Trump is already being judged 49th or 50th in various polls of political scientists and historians. I mean, who wants to be remembered as Millard Fillmore of the 21st century?
Well, and Newsmax polls, I'm sure he's number one. That's the
Yes.
remarkable thing. OAN's got him top president ever, an emperor. So let's shift gears and talk about some of the actual policy stuff that's going on. One is we're on day 14, I think, of the shutdown right now. And
Right.
the truth is, with shutdowns, until it affects people personally, like people furloughed or let go, it affects them personally. So putting them aside because they're instantaneously affected. The rest of American society, it takes time to catch up. Now the Smithsonian's closed. That affects a different group of people who are on vacation. Now you're seeing air traffic controllers. I remember the last shutdown, Trump, the long one, TSA started calling in sick. I mean, you wrote an article about it, that it's not theater. There's a real impact. What can you share? What are your concerns as this goes on with no end in sight at all?
Right. Well, first of all, we're not gathering data that we need. Businesses that
Yeah.
we have all these multi-billion-dollar businesses. There are roughly 3,000 US businesses that own 81% of the business assets. And they make decisions that are based heavily on macroeconomic issues. Are people's wages going up? What's the availability of various commodities we need to make or process things?
Right.
And they don't have the really excellent data the US gathers. The US, in terms of statistics, boring as that is, they're really important to our economic well being. But there's
Sure.
something much more important that's right on the horizon, Dean. The federal courts, as of today, are still open because they have various reserve funds.
Mhm.
They apparently will exhaust those this Friday, and the federal courts will close. Now, why is that a dangerous problem? Well, Donald keeps saying he wants to invoke the Insurrection Act. Terribly written piece of law that should have been fixed a long time ago. And the response, by the way, of some people who've spoken on behalf of the Trump administration is, yeah, well, Congress didn't fix it, so we're going to use it. And once the courts are closed, so, let's say that ICE grabs you off the street. Where are you going to get a judge for your habeas corpus petition? Where are you going to file your petition? You probably electronically can file it. How are you going to have a hearing, which requires not just a judge, but you got to have bailiffs and a court reporter to transcribe, et cetera. And Donald has made it clear he wants to invoke the Insurrection Act. He has said this many times, and we recently saw Stephen Miller let the cat out of the bag when on Fox he said that Donald Trump has plenary power, basically dictatorial power. And he froze. He didn't say another word, and Fox covered up for him by saying technical difficulties when that wasn't the case at all. This is the belief of the people around Trump. And Trump has said more than once, I have an article too that says I can do anything I want. He's reiterated that with similar words within the past 10 days. Well, once the federal courts close, that would be a opportune time for Donald to invoke the Insurrection Act, to put soldiers in the street, and impose his military dictatorship on the American people. Now, interestingly, Friday is the day the courts have indicated they run out of money. Saturday is the scheduled No Kings marches. Now, the government doesn't turn on a one-day dime, but if those marches are not peaceful, and there will be efforts by some law enforcement to provoke and cause trouble, that would help give Donald an excuse to invoke the Insurrection Act. And there's a related problem to this, and how the Supreme Court is dealing with cases brought against Trump. District judges and circuit courts of appeal have been basically upholding the law as it is. When Donald gets to the Supreme Court, the majority on what's called the shadow docket, that is, cases without a hearing, has been saying, well, the litigation may proceed, but we're going to allow the president to do what he's doing for now. That violates a fundamental legal principle you learned in law school for the first year, and that is irreparable harm. So if you're fired by the president illegally, you've suffered irreparable harm if you can't get your job back. If the government takes your property and bulldozes your house, you've suffered irreparable harm if they're allowed to proceed before the litigation's over. And I can absolutely see the 6-member majority on this Supreme Court saying, well, people can continue to litigate whether the invocation of the Insurrection Act is proper, whether the posse comitatus statute, which says you can't turn the U.S. military on the American people, whether it's proper. But we'll let the litigation proceed. In the meantime, the president can do what he's doing. This deference is really damaging to democracy. So the last No Kings March only, and I do deliberately say only, drew about 15 million people. That's not enough. That's not enough. We need about twice that many people, and that's what it's going to take to get some of the Republicans who know better and are simply afraid to stand up to Donald to perhaps find their spines. I know a lot of people think it'll never happen. You know, they've completely sold out. But Dean, I think it's very, very important that huge numbers of people turn out on Saturday in demonstrations all across the country, and that they be very careful not to provoke any trouble. If there are troublemakers, surround them and separate them and turn them over to the cops. It's kind of late to go get training on nonviolent protest, but that's essentially what you should do.
I think it's a very important point you raised, that we have a concern of agitators that are either funded by, MAGA or Trump, or just inspired by it. Just that they know they should go do something. And they're like, well, let's go help Donald Trump and cause trouble. We'll make these liberals, libtards, whatever you want to call them, and to show how dangerous they really are. And you already have Mike Johnson, the speaker, calling it a hate America rally. He calls it the pro-Hamas wing and the Antifa people. And other Republicans have repeated very similar words. I am concerned that Trump is very much looking for his Reichstag fire moment.
Yes.
We've covered on my show many times with Hitler and the Reichstag fire, or even Mussolini. I've given people the example there. In Mussolini, there was an assassination, and it was actually by his own people of a socialist. And he said in 1925, gave a famous speech in Italy, I did it. It's me. What are you going to do about it? And they did nothing. And then he grabbed more and more power. And then when a leftist did try an assassination attempt the next year, that's when he banned the other political parties. And that was it. He had absolute one-party rule. The Reichstag fire laid the framework, as you know, the path for one-party rule in Germany. That's what Trump and the GOP want.
So Stephen Miller the other day referred to the Democratic Party as not a legitimate party, but extremists.
Yeah.
And this is part of delegitimizing people. Authoritarian leaders have to do that. Trump has referred to people as vermin, a term that was used by the Nazis. But authoritarians, regardless of their political orientation, left or right, are all the same at the end of the day. And one of the things those people who think, well, it'd be good for this country to have a dictatorship, at least for a while, should recognize is, A, dictators don't give up power. They're overthrown. with a lot of bloodshed usually in the process, and few exceptions. South Africa at the end of the Soviet era in the Kremlin, but those are exceptions. And secondly, uh, they will in time turn on their own strongest followers. And the reason you do that is to instill discipline. So people, around Stalin, who were loyal to Stalin, they were executed.
Yeah.
Ordinary folks out there who were leaders of the local this or that group supporting the dictator in countries all over the world, they get picked up and disappeared because you have to maintain your terror and discipline even within your own ranks. And anybody who thinks that a Donald Trump dictatorship doesn't lead down the road to firing squads, and I say this as someone who would expect to die in front of one,
Wow.
if we get there in my lifetime. It could be years, it could be weeks. But anybody who thinks that it doesn't lead eventually to firing squads or their equivalent just doesn't understand and hasn't studied how authoritarianism works.
Yeah, and if people want a less academic way to see the same truth that's entertaining, watch The Death of Stalin, the movie from 2017 with Steve Buscemi and others. And it really matches pretty closely from what I read, what happened with Stalin. In the inner circle, they turn on each other. They're vipers. And
Yes.
they understand you have to get rid of people. And Saddam Hussein.
Well, in that movie, that is a fantastic dark comedy. I really encourage people to watch.
Right.
I wasn't going to watch it until a friend of mine said, "You really need to see this." And I've watched it 3 times now. Beria was the head of the secret police, and everybody knew that Beria, if he could get control, was going to kill them all to get his absolute power. And, the exercise of power, no matter what, even in a dictatorship, involves a lot of different parties, and they have different interests. And that's the reason that a dictator has to go around killing or disappearing key people, because they don't all operate on the same exact wavelength. They are not clones, and they have different viewpoints and interests, even if they're in a very narrow channel. So people should be extremely worried because Donald is doing what he always does. He talks openly about the crimes he's committing and planning to commit. He thinks somehow that insulates him. And, we've all heard people on places like Newsmax, faux news organizations. They're not news organizations. We've heard people on them say, well, he's saying he's going to do this, so it can't be that it's against the law.
Genius. That
is.
I agree that, and look what else. I mean, this term's changed. He called for people to be prosecuted and leaned into it. I just wrote an article about in the first term, people are not going to remember it because it wasn't relevant to their world. He called for the FCC to investigate Saturday Night Live for mocking him in 2019. And the reporting was after he left that he asked some staffers about it. They said, oh, yeah, we talked to them. That was the end of it. This time he's not letting things go, whatever it might be. He is pressing on it. And there was really jarring reporting from Reuters on Friday that now this labeling Antifa is extending, and they're beginning to do what the executive order called for. And there was a companion one a few days later, and that's investigating anyone who are Democratic aligned organizations. And now in that article, it talked about Act Blue and Indivisible. And I had Ezra Levin on Friday, my show, who's from Indivisible, co-founder, who said this is right from the Authoritarian playbook, and they're coming after them because they're one of the big people involved in No Kings and in organizing peaceful, nonviolent protests against Donald Trump, and they're very effective. They're coming after the democratic infrastructure, which is another way to get to one-party rule. The goal is one-party rule, where on the national level, it could be Mussolini, it could be Viktor Orban in Hungary with the Fidesz party, and it could be Mussolini, Hitler, whatever you want. But that's the goal. It's very clear, and this is the next level. And I wonder if Democrats are going to be able to effectively fight back. And this is very, very worrying. People are not going to donate their money. People are not going to want to go to the organizational events. They're going to be worried about being investigated or indicted. That's what Trump wants.
No, it is. And he's brought these bogus prosecutions. James Comey has a very, very good lawyer, Patrick Sullivan, in his criminal case. Fitzgerald, I'm sorry, yes.
That's and okay. It's another Irish name.
He has already told the trial court judge that they are going to bring a motion for selective and vindictive prosecution, which is barred by law by both legal theory and specific statute. Well, I hope the judge does not grant that order.
Why?
Because I want the judge to instead order discovery. and
Ah,
to give Patrick Fitzgerald, the power to call in under oath and question Lindsay Halligan, the lawyer who didn't know how to be a prosecutor because she's never been one, that Trump put in to get an indictment, to call in under oath the lawyers who would not go along with this and others, because I think a record of discovery will show that this is absolutely improper. But not having a record just allows Donald to say, a lunatic judge.
right.
No, let's have a hearing. And I hope the same happens with the other people who are going to bring the same sort of argument. You know, JD Vance said on one of the networks the other day that, you know, it's obvious that Letitia James is guilty of mortgage fraud. Well, Letitia James took out a mortgage on a second home and identified it as such. And subsequent to that, she turned it into a rental. Yeah, she has better loan terms than if she had gone out and said, I want to get a rental. It's perfectly legal to do what she did. I've done it. I have rented out homes I've owned for
Sure.
years and wish I'd still kept them and what happened to the real estate market, but in California. But these are ridiculous things. And here's a Yale educated lawyer, JD Vance, and he's saying these things. Um, uh, One would hope there would be a mechanism, and there really isn't, to go after go after them at the bar, take away the law licenses of Pam Bondi and others. And by the way, you don't have to be a lawyer to be the Attorney General of the United States, just as you don't have to be a member of Congress to be Speaker of the House.
By the way, I'm not sure if you saw this a very short time ago. James Comey's lawyers filed notice they're going to file a motion challenging the appointment of Lindsay Halligan. And that, in a way, is oddly enough taking page from Trump's case down in Florida. And
Right.
that got the case, Eileen Cannon, to dismiss it. And maybe this is the way the judge does it. And then it's beyond the statute of limitations. And Comey's protected, but then it goes to the point where Trump says, oh, it was a judge that did it, blah, 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 as
Right,
opposed
right.
to hearing the merits.
Dean, that's why I hope that the judge holds that decision in abeyance. She was not properly appointed. I've gone and read the statute. It's very clear. She wasn't properly qualified and therefore had no power to go before a grand jury and seek an indictment. But I hope the judge holds that in abeyance. It would really be beneficial to have a thorough discovery all the way up to questioning Donald Trump. And let's remember the United States Supreme Court held in Bill Clinton's time that President of the United States can be subject to subpoena and testifying under oath.
I agree. All right, so let's take a quick break. We're going to come back and talk about some financial issues with the China and Trump trade war, but also Trump bailing out Argentina. $20 billion of our taxpayer dollars going to Argentina. No, not to the farmers of the U.S. in need, but Argentina. So let's take a break, come right back. Welcome back to the Dean Obeidallah Show. And we'll continue our conversation with David Cay Johnston, a Pulitzer Prize winner, journalist, best-selling author, teacher at Rochester Institute of Technology. So, David, before we started, we chatted a little bit about Trump giving $20 billion. It's through a currency swap, but it's still $20 billion to Argentina. And there's U.S. farmers in need. Americans are about to lose their subsidies for ACA, and millions will not be able to afford insurance. But he's giving $20 billion to the leader of Argentina, who they like, that guy, Trump and Scott Bessent. They like him a lot. What could you share?
Well, Milei, the current president of Argentina, is right out of the right-wing austerity playbook, as were his two predecessors. And all around the world, what we're seeing is where governments adopt austerity policies, they get poorer. 53% of Argentinians are now officially poor.
Wow.
As a result of the policies there. And in the countries that have taken the opposite approach, we see a prosperity where governments facilitate the movement of money and fund the government services and goods that allow for private wealth creation, everything from roads and highways to public education, scientific research, et cetera. And this deal is part of an effort to help an authoritarian. If the leader in Brazil had been the current leader of, Argentina had been the current leader of Brazil, Donald wouldn't be providing any help.
Right.
He's not going to do anything if it suddenly became necessary for any of the Western democracies in Europe. This is simply an effort to do that. And around the edges of this, there's two other big issues going on. One is that there are a bunch of Wall Street speculators who made a mistaken bad bet on Argentinian finances, and they're effectively being bailed out by this. We keep bailing out speculators. It's important in markets to have speculators because they set the contours of the market. But if you bail speculators out, now you're destroying the market or certainly damaging it very heavily. And then there's been some recent news reports showing how a whole bunch of criminal elements have figured out how to profit off of this Argentinian disaster. And by the way, it isn't just our 20 billion. Argentina earlier got from the World Bank 10 or 20 billion dollars. Instead of letting this problem unfold over time. By the way, if you're planning to go on vacation and go to Argentina, I got a strong piece of advice for you. Take as many $1 and $5 bills as you can because you won't believe the discounts. You want to go out to a dinner that nominally would be $200, it'll be like $25 because that's how valuable greenbacks are in Argentina.
That's remarkable. And according to CNN reporting, so what the U.S. is doing, we're buying their currency, and it's the Argentinian peso. It's only the fourth time since 1996 that the U.S. has bought another country's currency. It's only the fourth time since 1996, and they're doing it now because there is an arguably risk of financial collapse, and you can argue it would bring down other countries, but it really is, I think, what you're talking about. They're well-connected people who the Treasury Secretary knows from his days on Wall Street, Scott Bessent, and they're bailing them out there, and because they like the leader. I read about him that the right in the UK, in the right, they're saying this guy is the template for what you should do in terms of cutting spending and bringing down inflation, but it's caused a great deal of pain to working class and lower income people in the country. And that's
but he's not doing, that's the story being told by American journalists, that Milei has improved the things and made them wonderful. No, he's not. That's the official version of events. I mean, that's one of the problems in journalism is most journalism is the official version of events and the official criticisms of the official versions of events. That's not the real story of what's going on. And the story is in the numbers that are available. And they showed this is a disastrous policy. And this $20 billion where we're buying Argentinian pesos, we'll eventually unload those. And my guess is we'll get about 200 million, which is a loss of 99 cents on our dollar.
And you look in the world we live in, David, because we chatted earlier on this, there's so much going on. Like in a normal presidency, this kind of story, if a Democratic president did it, Fox News would cover America Last, giving our money. There'd be stories in the street, veterans that are homeless need the money, all that. And those are valuable stories. I mean, they're political spin, but they're still real stories. You're not going to see anything, even though Trump's meeting with the Argentinian leader, because in 2 minutes later, he's posting about this. It almost feels like, David, that every day Trump wakes up and posts what the news story of the day is going to be, and corporate media covers it. He'll post about something on Truth Social, or they'll line up a trip somewhere. They are programming our news on a daily basis. That's what it really feels.
Well, news organizations need to cover the president, need to cover what he's doing.
Right.
But we can also do it at a remove. Now, Pete Hegseth has put out these new rules that basically, if you're a Pentagon correspondent, you will only write what we put in press releases, and you won't do any inquiry or checking anywhere. And a whole bunch of big news organizations have said we're not going to play by those rules, including Rupert Murdoch's Wall Street Journal.
Right.
You don't need to be at the Pentagon or the White House to cover them. When David Crook and I launched DC Report at the very beginning of 2017, just ahead of Trump taking office, our idea was that we're not going to cover press conferences. We've never been to a press conference. We're going to cover the story that's lying there right in the public record and nobody's seeing it. So I think the second story we published was about how House Republicans changed the rules of the House to allow giving away lands owned by the taxpayers, public lands. The government owns about a third of the country. Giving away public lands and not recording them on the books, not saying, well, this asset was given away and it's no longer a U.S. asset. Just ignore that. And now you're seeing finally the serious move now to start giving away lands. Trump wants to allow cutting down our national forests and allowing drilling in various places that we've protected as parks, monuments, national forests. The Pentagon, there's so many great stories about what's going on with the Pentagon where you don't need to be in the Pentagon. Better be on the phone talking to people who are military experts around the world about what's going on, looking at the mandated reports on spending and other things. And that's what I've done my whole career. I've made it a point not to be in Washington. When the New York Times hired me to write about the IRS and how does our tax system really work as opposed to all the myths we live by, I was never going to work in Washington. I worked out of the newsroom in New York, out of my home in Rochester, New York, and a lot of living in airplanes. And we need more journalists to do that. You need to have people who are on the scene. I don't mean to say you shouldn't, but that's not the only way to cover things. And so if 50% of the resources right now devoted to covering the Pentagon from inside the Pentagon were pulled out and put to work covering the Pentagon from the outside, we get better coverage.
So would you watch the press conferences now, if you do, with Caroline Levitt? Do we even need those? And that, I mean, I know they answer questions, but if she says things that disagree with Trump, they'll just say, well, that's not what she meant. Or there's not a lot of follow-up often. It's just talking points by her. And they go write these stories based on what the White House press secretary said, who's a meaningless figure in the world of Donald Trump, at least. She's meaningless. He's speaking all the time. Why do I don't know what they serve, to be honest.
This is a difficult proposition. I think big news organizations need to be there.
Right.
But, when I was at the LA Times in the 70s and 80s, there were 4 White House correspondents for the LA Times. 4. The New York Times has, I would guess from the bylines I follow, 7 or 8 White House correspondents. So have somebody who goes to the Daily Follies with Caroline Levitt, but put the rest of them to work following the paperwork, and the things going on outside the White House. I actually proposed when Reagan was elected, and it was clear that was the end of the New Deal. It'd be a big change. I went to the editors of the LA Times and said, why don't you make me the 5th White House correspondent? And the rule is I can't leave LA. And they went, how are you going to cover it? And I said, I'm going to cover all the paperwork, the appointments, the policy memos. And the national editor at the time said, that is the most brilliant idea I've ever heard. There's no snowball's chance in hell I'll do that.
Wow. Why did he want to do that? It sounds great.
He said it would upset the Washington Bureau. I had talked to the Washington Bureau chief, so I knew it wouldn't upset him. Right. What he really was worried about was it would make the LA Times an enemy of Ronald Reagan. And a target unnecessarily. Remember, LA is Ronald Reagan in both 80 and 84 lost the city of Los Angeles. Fact people only know because I got little 1-paragraph items in pointing that out. He won LA County. He won the country big in 84. You want to see someone who got a landslide election, the kind Donald claims with a mandate?
Yeah.
It'd be LBJ in 64 and Ronald Reagan in 84. Editors, high-level editors don't want to make unnecessary enemies. They'll back up your story. You bring in a tough story, they'll run it. But they don't go looking to pick trouble.
So is the climate, though, different now, quantitatively, if that's the right use of it in this? Here, is it different than then where the corporate, the editors, they had their goals, they didn't want to lose access, that kind of stuff. But at the time of Trump, there are actually investigations into media outlets, which cause them a lot of pain and make them pay money. Is it different?
Yeah. Oh, I think there's a lot that's different. I mean, first of all, the relationship with the public is different. In the 60s, 70s, and 80s, politicians knew if you came as a reporter and were competent at what you were doing and asking tough questions, they needed to pay attention because it could end their careers because voters paid attention. Courtesy of the far right in this country and a literally 53-year campaign, to the best of my knowledge, and maybe longer, to discredit honest journalism. All sorts of people are, you can't believe what's in the New York Times or the Washington Post, even though it's meticulously, carefully reported. Do we screw up? Sure. We're a human institution. And, unlike any other profession, however, we disclose our screw ups.
Hmm.
When we had a fabulous an intern at the New York Times who was making stuff up, 14,000 word front page coverage on a Sunday, and the top editor and the number two editor got fired. They weren't given golden handcuffs, they were fired. When the LA Times, the story got out that the publisher and CEO of the parent of the LA Times, who had no experience in the news business, he ran one of the big cereal companies in Minneapolis, made a profit sharing deal over something called the Staples Center. It's a big arena and performance venue. Paper ran a special section that was, I think, 32,000 words self-investigating it. And we do this all the time. We have the
Wow.
Columbia Journalism Review. We used to have lots of journalism reviews. It's the only major one left. Cops don't do that. Doctors don't do that. Lawyers don't do that. But nonetheless, the public has been persuaded that, I've spent my entire life just lying to people. It is laughable to anybody who knows my work. But if you don't know it, how do you know that old guy with a gray beard isn't just a paid liar?
And things have changed in the last few years. And I mean, Washington Post used to be this, I would say this, maybe it's too simplistic, but a liberal bastion. I mean, the op-eds they were certainly pro-democracy and pro-transparency. And it's changed a lot. I mean, I see op-eds now, like they had one just in the last day or two, slamming Zoran Mondani in New York for wanting to have free buses, which is a fair point if you want to raise it, but it's not something you would usually see in the Washington Post. And it comes from the Jeff Bezos view that their op-eds have to be free enterprise and about the rich making more money. That's really what's going
Well,
on there. There was no need
but
for that op-ed.
Dean, don't conflate news and opinion. There really is a firm wall between news and opinion. Not at some smaller papers, but at the big papers in the country, the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Washington Post, LA Times. There is an absolute separation. And the breaches of it are incredibly minor. I mean, a few times the editorial page of the New York Times would have someone come down to ask me questions because they didn't understand an issue. That would be it.
Right.
Just fact seeking from me as you would from anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And so the news departments are separate. Now, what we're about to see at CBS is this not very good journalist and propagandist named Barry Weiss, who just sold her company for, depending on the news version you read, 150 or $200 million, called Free Press. She's now essentially the head of CBS News. And Elon Musk, she said, I want a memo explaining what you do and justifying your existence. And she's made it clear that she's going to interfere in the news department. The publisher of the New York Times, a good example of this, the Ox family's owned the paper for about 130 years now. There have been two occasions in that time that the publisher stayed at the afternoon news meeting. If he comes to the news meeting, he gets to hear who's pitching stories for the front page. But halfway through the meeting, the publisher and all the section editors leave, and then the editors in charge of the front page decide, well, this we're going to run big, this we're not going to run at all, this is going to get a reefer. And the publisher only stayed twice. One of them was to tell the staff, the top editor, something that President Nixon had just told him. And the other time was over something equally insignificant, but he thought the editors should know. He's never said, play this big, don't play that big. The place where that happens every day, Fox.
Yeah. There's no doubt. I mean, they're catering to their audience at the expense of facts and our democracy. If they think it plays for the audience, because they also have competitors now that are real. Newsmax is a competitor. They're not close in numbers, but they're taking little things away. And also they're competing with online podcasts that are really popular, that are eclipsing the audience of cable news audiences. When you look at Fox News, their ratings right now are actually very strong. They're only down last year, month to date, from the last year, this time was a presidential election year, down 7 or 8%. MS and CBS and CNN are down 45 to 48% each. Like the bottom is dropped out of MS and CNN.
Because a lot of people, well, first of all, I think MSNBC's problem is just constant Trump. You need to have some change ups and do some other things and other perspectives. But the crowd who follow Fox, who are basically people my age, I'm almost Donald's age, they have very fixed views, and they're happy right now because they're getting what they want. I'm not surprised that the MSNBC and CNN haven't done as well. A lot of people are like, well, there's nothing we can do, which is the worst possible outcome of all this. Just let me one little point, Dean, that if we had ever gotten a memo as they issue at Fox saying, here's what we're going to do in the news today at the New York Times, I would have had everybody in the newsroom out on the street in 5 minutes. And because I've organized things inside the Times, people who work there know that I could do that. And I would have gotten people and said, we're walking out, and we would have been on the sidewalk, because you don't do that. You do not tell journalists what they're going to do. It's the very nature of what we do. You assign somebody a beat. You're covering the White House. Okay, now you got to go cover the White House. But you don't say, and by the way, you're going to cover gently our great leader. That just never happens. Newsrooms every day have big ethical discussions. I once saw a near fist fight, a cocked fist at least, over a comma and the ethics of that comma. So, ethics are something journalists talk about every day. Now, maybe you can disagree about whether we get it right or wrong, but we talk about it, we care about it, we pay a lot of attention. Those of us who've written about national security matters and things like that, we treat information with great sensitivity. And to be clear, that's been a minor part of my career. But, you're very aware, dangerous things can happen. People can die. You handle things very carefully. So if we don't have trust in the news media, though, who benefits? Any dictator, starting with Donald. And what did Solzhenitsyn say about the Russians, the Soviet? We know they're lying. They know we know they're lying. We know that they know that we know that they're lying. And it goes on and on.
Oh, that's funny. Well, David, we covered a lot of ground. We didn't even get to all the topics, but it's so great chatting with you. Do you want people to follow you at dcreport.org on social media? Where's the best place to follow your work?
Well, dcreport.org, where I'm a volunteer. We run it on a shoestring. I've started doing 2-minute videos called Reality Check.
Ah, great.
We've got 2 or 3 of them up. One of them's too long, but they're going to be 2 minutes or less. And we have a YouTube channel for DC Report. I'm not the publisher anymore. I gave that up almost 3 years ago. A friend of mine in Los Angeles, who was a movie studio executive and whose movies made $7 for every dollar they cost to make.
Wow.
Movies like Dead Poets Society and Good Morning Vietnam.
Oh, great movies.
He took it over, and they're doing a very, very good job of it. And of course, we publish a lot of people, a lot of academic stuff that you just don't find anywhere else that tell you what's going on. And we try to keep it concise so that you can have a different perspective. But our motto from the start, when David Crook and I began this, was we cover what politicians do, not just what they say. And that's at the core of the real problem, Dean, is covering what politicians say and not what they do.
Very interesting. Well, thank you, David. Thanks so much for spending so much time. It's always great chatting with you. I look forward to chatting with you in the future, my friend.
Take care.